Hey everybody, Monica King here, King's Titan Homestead. Oh, I made some meatloaf burritos for the guys to take hiking today. And so I'm kind of enjoying my morning. It's around 5 a.m. I already downed a bunch of coffee. I'm like trying to make something for myself for breakfast. So I've got leftover potatoes and I'm not gonna really use them over the next few days. So I figured for breakfast I would try to use them up. I might not use up all the leftover potatoes today. Maybe I'll make this again tomorrow morning for myself. I don't know. But anyway, so the meatloaf I'm saving for the burritos. I've got enough to do another small batch. But I've got these really, actually, yeah, I probably could do two. So I'm gonna make myself just one potato pancake and some bacon for breakfast. And the potato pancake is going to have my egg inside of it. So it's just leftover mashed potatoes, one egg. Gotta wash it. Throw that egg in there. I went out to the garden with my flashlight and picked up some Aotoy onion. So it's like a walking onion, basically a native onion to southern Arizona, and some garlic chives. So I just chopped up the onion. You can use any onion, you can use regular chives. You can use anything you want. You want to put in some parsley. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Just this is your little potato pancake. Put in whatever seasonings you want to. And so I'm just going to mix this up really good. And what the egg is going to serve as a binder. So it's going to hold the pancake together. And then because I've already started with a little bacon grease in the pan, I don't need to add any butter or anything like that to it. So basically, here's my batter now. Is just a beautiful creamy yellow potato with my chives and everything. So I get the pan. I'm going to remove the bacon from the pan. So I'm waiting for the pan to get really hot. Let me add a little cracked pepper to this. Okay, now that the pan is kind of sizzling, I'm just going to put the pancake in there. Allowing it to kind of flatten out. I'm smacking it a little bit with the fork to get it a little bit flatter. It's gonna be one giant pancake. So when you notice that it's browning around the edges is when you're going to flip it. And I'm gonna use two spatulas because I made a giant pancake. It didn't hold together. Wink-a-ploo. But it's gonna taste good. It doesn't matter what it looks like, it's gonna taste good, I swear. I can already, man, the roosters are going crazy out there. So this is the little swarm that was hanging in a tree for, I think, close to a week is what they were saying. And I spotted the queen, grabbed her, and put her under the excluder. But I'm just double checking to make sure that there's no others. They're pretty feisty little girls. See, I got a sting here on the end of my glove and just moving. I mean, this is a swarm. They were just hanging with no comb in the tree. So when people say swarms are not defensive, I always try to educate people to say they can be. And normally, look at this. I mean, this is a swarm. And normally the swarms are not, you know, I can work the swarms with no gloves, you know, and things. And not so with some of them. So these are Africanized. It's not a behavior, it is a genetic, but we never know when they're going to act like this. So you treat them all like they have this potential. Okay, so the potato pancake and bacon for breakfast. And I had my egg inside the potato pancake. Things like this were taught to me by my parents and my grandparents. My grandparents who had actually lived, you know, through the Great Depression. So they found ways to reuse or repurpose or not waste food, any items. And this is like a time period that I love to study. Not that I ever want to live in that time period, but I want to be prepared in case we're thrown into something like they lived through in the, you know, 1930s, 1940s. And so I started watching Wartime Farm, and it was put out by BBC. So, you know, it's based in Britain, but amazing. The research that was done is supposed to be historically accurate. And so this documentary is like taking this group of people back to make them live on a farm like they would have had to have done from like 1937 for about 5 years, kind of thing, and putting them through the stresses that the people would have went through during that time. Other than the people that were actually there didn't know how the outcome was going to be, and they didn't know, you know, it's so amazingly. So the first season, what I learned so far was, you know, things you don't think about today. So let's say you have aerial bombing coming and you have your lights on, and that's like target. So basically Britain had everybody use blackout curtains, blackout, you know, wood, and cut down ration on items. They literally had like patrol officers that would say whether or not, you know, they could see your light. And so this guy knocked on their door and it's like, hey, I can see light underneath your front door. You didn't put a jacket or a coat to stop the light, and so that's going to be a fine of 3 shillings. Yeah, they did. And then when he got in the house, he's like, oh, wait a minute here, you're burning too many lights. There's too many lights on. So there was another fine for using too many lights in one room. Just amazing the amount of cutback that was having to occur in order for the war effort to. And so, you know, even though these people, the farmers, weren't the soldiers and they didn't get into uniform, they ended up having to be the backup. So there was an auxiliary team created of farmers by the government so that they were like the guerrilla warfare behind the scenes. And so like the women were enrolled in this team in order to like do communication. So like out in their potting sheds, they would have like, you know, little Morse code and radios and things, and they would use anonymous code names, and husbands and wives didn't even tell each other about who was on what on the team, you know. And it was just amazing the things that these people went through, because not only were they put on the stress of increasing the farm yield in order to feed the population, they were also had this auxiliary effort, guerrilla soldiers in the background, plus telling them that they had to make more food than their farm has ever made before. And women were then also asked not only to, you know, do communications for the behind the scenes, you know, war, but also they were used in the farm, out in the fields to drive the tractors, because they needed as much workers as they possibly could get. And women still had to cook and clean and provide for the family inside the home. So women were trying to find as many ways as possible to cut back on time, like, figuring out different things that could save, like instead of mopping the house taking 45 minutes, cutting it back to where it only took like 15 minutes, how they could do things like that. It just was amazing. I'm going to put a link, in case you haven't watched it, to that Wartime Farm episode 1. It's the only one I've watched so far, and this is kind of like my review of it, and it really, really makes you think. So I'm hoping that more people that haven't heard of it or haven't watched it might just watch it, because these are things that we didn't learn in our history books here in America. So very interesting. Let me know what you think about that Wartime Farm. I mean, like, I just was like amazed. It was really well done. I love it. The bees are just starting to touch the Ultra Bee feeders. So you know what, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention about the Wartime Farm that was just really interesting, and it might be stuff that you're not thinking about, like, should something ever happen. But even in that time period, 1937-ish, in Great Britain, they were importing a lot of their foods. So it was mentioned, that they were making a recipe from a 1930s cookbook, and it was called bacon and bananas. An odd mix, for sure. But they didn't throw away anything. I mean, there was like waste not, want not, so they had a meal of bacon and bananas. And they mentioned that it was just going to be a short period of time before they wouldn't have any bacon anymore, because I think the bacon was being imported from Denmark. And of course, bananas, you don't grow those on the countryside of England. So there's some really interesting things, because you think back then, the import, and what's happening today, how much we rely on these imports. And so if there's war anywhere, all of that stuff shuts down, and that country has to become self-sustainable. So, food for thought.